Alright, so tonight we're looking at section 5.2. We're going to look at something called corresponding parts of congruent figures. The only problem I'm going to ask you to do tonight is problem number 6, and that's wrong. It's problem number 6, and the page number is 260. So you're doing problem number 6 on page 260. And that's what you're going to do with what we're doing tonight. So the statement here is whenever figures are congruent, all of their corresponding parts are congruent. So we're going to look at what that means. So let's pull up a diagram here. And here I have two triangles. I have triangle TOP and triangle CAN. So what we're looking at here and what we have on this diagram is we have matched up the parts that are corresponding. Now I already know that TOP and CAN are congruent. So now what I've marked on this diagram is the parts of those triangles that are congruent. So if you look here, this is showing me that angle T is congruent to angle C. Notice how they're both marked the same way. Side TP is congruent to side CN. And again, it's marked with the one slash so that I know that this side is congruent to this side. Side TO is congruent to side CA. Notice there are two slashes here and two slashes there, so that's telling me that they're congruent. And side OP is congruent to side AN. And again, this one has three slashes. So this angle and this angle are congruent. Angle O and angle A are congruent. Angle P and angle N are congruent. It would actually be better on this diagram if, say, angle P was marked with 2 arcs along with angle N, and angle O was marked with 3 arcs along with angle A. So whenever we say that corresponding parts of congruent figures are congruent, what we're looking at is we're trying to figure out, okay, if I were looking at this figure, which part corresponds within the two figures. So I'm looking at how would I match these up? How do they look? This also works the other way around. Since I know that all of these parts are congruent, I could also say the figures are congruent. So it does work in the other direction, but we normally use it in the direction that if the figures are congruent, then the parts are congruent. But I think we can look at another example that might help you a little bit more. It's the same two triangles. It's still TOP and CAN. And they give me some information here. They're telling me that angle T is 118. So there's angle T at 118. They're telling me that angle A is 27, and they're telling me that angle N is 35. Okay, because I know that these two are congruent, I can look at the matchups. Angle T would be congruent to angle C. So T and C are both 118 degrees. Angle O would be congruent to angle A. So O and A are both 27. Angle P is going to be congruent to angle N. So I know angle N is 35, angle P is also 35. So that allows me to find all of the missing angle measures that I need because those are the corresponding parts. Notice that not only are they marked on the diagram that they're corresponding, but whenever I was looking at the names of the two triangles, I was lining things up, like T lines up with C because they're both in the same places in the name. O is going to line up with A because they're in the same places in the name. So that's another way that you can pull the corresponding parts out of just the names. Okay, so we've looked at the angles, now let's take a look at the sides. I know that side CA, which is right here, side CA is 3 4/10. TP, which is up here, is 2 7/10. And OP, which is over here on this one, OP is 5 2/10. Okay? Now again, whenever I look at this, I see CA is 3 4/10. Well, because CA is 3 4/10, that means TO is also 3 4/10. So not only would this one be 3 4/10, since that's CA, we would also look at TO being 3 4/10. And then if we want to look at TP, when we're looking at TP, we're looking at the T and P. We know that TP is going to be congruent to CN. So that means CN, since it's TP is 2 7/10, so is CN. And then we can go back one more time. Whoops, not what I meant to do. We can go back and we can pick up OP. Okay, so here's OP right here in this one. OP is going to be congruent to AN. So OP is 5 2/10. So that means AN is 5 2/10. So this is how corresponding parts of congruent figures match up, and this is how we can use it. If you go to the assignment now, the assignment is going to be doing problem number 6 on page 260.